conversation in exploring what our thoughts around leadership are and what our approaches historically to leadership are and how we can do it differently and do it better. So,
I'll just pause that. Okay. Here you are, Samantha. I'll let you take the lead.
okay, is the PowerPoint?
Yes, the PowerPoint is here. Let's share your screen. Let's see.
Thank you so much, Sainara. I know it is extremely stressful being tech support on the spot in a situation like this. So we really appreciate her. If we could give her a hand. All right. So this is probably going to be a longer presentation than we can realistically present here today in less than an hour. So there are going to be some slides that I may not touch on or that I may breeze through pretty quickly. But before we get started, what I would like to do is I think every table has a large Post-it note. Some of y'all got markers. I got to admit, I ran out of markers. I didn't get them on all of the tables. But what I want to invite you to do before we even start our conversation is to come up with either a definition at your table of leadership or to come up with some words that you believe are attributed to leadership or, represent what leadership is to you. So if we could take like a minute or two at our tables to do that, I would really appreciate it. And then I'm going to ask different folks around the rooms at the tables to kind of share what each group came up with. Yeah. Some really first conversations. Can we bring attention back here, please? Hello. All right, all right, thank you. It looks like everyone was really engaged in that. It looks like that was hopefully a good kickoff to everyone thinking about leadership. And I saw hands go up very early at the table with Doug Case. They seem to be very excited about hearing their definition of leadership. So I'm going to give them the opportunity to speak first.
Definition was influencing and motivating others to work together to achieve common goals and do.
All right, thank you. Does any table want to share?
We wrote out like some bullet points and we put inspirational and encouraging, able to get people to move in the direction they should be moving. Open to everyone's ideas and feedback, organizing and prioritizing, able to delegate, and ability to both listen and act.
Thank you. That was very. Now, we got one more in the back.
Now, I just thought about honesty. As keywords that we look for in leadership: honesty, integrity, inspirational, transparency, accountability, good listener, expectations, education, and responsibility. Back when I saw those people here, who wanted to speak for this. So my.
In a bulleted list of all the things. Be organized. Given for like repeated all the time. Inspiration, communication, organized. Appreciation, assertive. Part of it. This. Trust and dedicated.
One thing I have to say is that. All right, thank you. So. We have to share things that to meet people. We have a coast there with the idea of consensus. Naturally, consensus is very important in a democratic space. So here is a commonly used kind of academic definition of leadership. Leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. And if you notice here, I've got certain words that I highlighted in red and underlined because I think that really speaks to the place that we're in at this time in our nation's history, in our region, and what we need to be aspiring for as it relates to how we as Democrats show up as leaders. So leadership has a certain art to it, meaning that there is skill and there's grace and there's multiple components and there's a lot of intention. So there's the art piece. There's the mobilizing others. You know, we just had conversation around GOTV and how important that is. And, you know, how we can use our clubs to be a part of the initiatives around getting people involved in democratic processes and motivating people into spaces of leadership within the party. So there's the mobilizing others. And we all know that we are at a point of struggle in our nation. So the struggle is real. And then shared aspirations, and that speaks to the consensus piece that just came up. So, you know, when you think about leadership, this may be a succinct definition that sums up all the things that we heard at the different tables. So at this point, I want to ask you guys a few questions. How many of you in this room consider yourselves to be leaders? All right, looks like that's almost every hand in the room. So here's a question. What motivated you all to become leaders? You can shout it out. Okay, someone just said they're interested in improving the world. Anyone else have a thought on why?
Discontent.
Discontent, okay, I see a hand in the back there. No, okay, that is a very common motivator for leadership. For our friends online who may not have heard that, the gentleman said nobody else was doing it. That gets us into the position many times more often than not. I see a hand here.
Yeah. I want to make a difference.
All right, wanting to make a difference. Thank you so much for sharing that. So here's the next question. How many of you actually had people that you could closely identify with in some way in your life, in your formative years, that inspired you into leadership, or did it just kind of happen organically for you, like the gentleman who just said nobody else was doing it? Okay,
Okay, my mommy influenced me.
all right.
But for
Thank you. A gentleman shared that his mom influenced him, and I saw a lot fewer hands this time around, right? So that says something, right? So few of us may have had proximity to leaders that we could identify with who were inspiring us to take a role, to step forward, and to inspire others. But we're all here today, right? And being here today means that hopefully we want to represent leadership in a way that we didn't see it represented in our formative years. So I'm going to invite you to do that, right? And I'm going to invite you to do it with a level of intention that you may not have been doing it previously. So, typo. Here's a question for you. And as a coach, you may notice that a big part of what I do is asking people questions and giving them the space to explore the answers within themselves, okay? So you're asked, why does she keep asking questions instead of giving us information? That's why. All right, so question number one, what are some common historical images of leadership that come to mind for you?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln, okay, thank you. I thought that too, yes, he was a Republican.
Military.
The military, okay, as a naval veteran, I feel that. Anyone else?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama, thank you. MLK, Harriet Tubman, okay. All right. Ma'am, you're,
Dolores Huerta.
thank you, Dolores Huerta. Rosa Parks. Okay, so these are some pretty iconic names. These are people that we've all heard of and may have been inspired by in learning about our history. And we know that we're in a time in America where we're a little bit in spaces and in certain states wanting to keep people from having the opportunity to learn about history and to be inspired by these diverse leaders whose names we heard called out here today. So, yay for history. Next question. What images of leadership did you personally identify with? Yes.
My college coaches, I was lucky enough to know John Wooden. And his art of leadership was, you have 12 players on the team. Only 5 can play at one time. So the other 7 are thinking, why am I not playing? And they are. So his definition of leadership was, if you can get the 6th, 7th, and 8th man to side with the top 5 and bring along the 9th through the 12th who are not going to play and keep them on the same road, you've got a championship opportunity.
All right, so what we just had there was a sports kind of approach to leadership. This gentleman shared that he is inspired by coaches that he had encountered with in his life. Yes, sir, in the back.
Movements, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and those movements in turn create leaders.
All right. Thank you. So we just had someone share that they've been inspired by movements, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, and the women's rights movement, because those movements have created leaders that he was able to see and be inspired by. Ma'am, you in the back, yes.
I was encouraged. My mother was raised in East Germany under communism and they escaped. When she was a teenager, were refugees. And her life story and how she changed her life, what we were able to break away from and the values she taught us led me to be a lifelong leader starting as a young child.
Okay, so we had someone else in the room share that she was inspired by her mom, who was a refugee from a communist nation, and that was really inspiring to her as to what leadership could be. Yes.
Yes, inspired by the anti-apartheid movement against South African apartheid. I was in college, the boycott, divestment, sanction movement, which brought that sucker back. That helped, among other things. There was Nelson Mandela and some other things, but yeah, those corporations didn't like people not buying this product.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So someone just shared that they were inspired by the anti-apartheid movement while they were in college. I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, visionaries.
Visionaries.
They come from the most humble demographics in society, generally speaking, and they rise up in the midst of turmoil. They generally, when everybody else is stepping back, they are the ones who don't step back. They step forward. So those traits of humility, servanthood are all pretty much embedded in these types of leaders who have a vision and are visionaries because they have embedded in them.
All right, so sharing that, being inspired by visionaries who have passion and are motivating the folks around them. I'm going to take two more responses.
August 28, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Davis, great speech. Peaceful resistance, success.
Okay, so we just had someone share that they were inspired by the peaceful resistance movements of Mahatma Gandhi and MLK. And I see a hand we haven't seen yet, Rob.
To piggyback on his, I think the images that I identify with is a recognition of what you have to work with. Because a lot of the peaceful resistance movement for me was because if we're not peaceful, did you have the necessary support, firepower to be able to fight back? For me, the identification is recognize what you have to work with.
Okay, so Rob shared that he feels that leadership has to recognize the limitations and the parameters of the circumstances in order to be present and move people forward towards a goal. All right, thank you. So those were a lot of images that people want to identify with. As individuals who are present in the community, who are moving around in clubs and in the democratic space, what images of leadership do you want to create?
This doubles on being a teacher. People feeling like they make a difference, and just the fact that you're a human in this world here, bring value. And so bringing that, all those different pieces of value together to make a stronger difference, but basically empowering people that who you are matters and you are welcome in spaces and belong. Okay, so we just had a gentleman who's a teacher share that he feels that it's really important for leaders to allow everyone to feel that their basic humanity has value and allows them to show up in spaces and be leaders as well. Anyone else?
Rather than self-indulgence, how about good servant leaders?
Okay, all right. So we had someone share that servant leadership is an image of leadership that they want to create and promote. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to be a leader who is known as someone who takes action.
Okay, so she shared that she wants to be a leader who motivates folks to take action, invites people to action. All right, so what do you think you're responsible for in the spaces that you move in then to create those images of leadership that you just shared you want to put out into the community? Yes, hand in the back.
You don't have to be nice, extend voice if necessary, to be inclusive, be an ally. So sometimes you're not
all we'd like for it today.
All right. So she shared that, sometimes being a leader is not just about being nice. It's about having the confidence to put forth the dissenting voice for the purpose of creating and demonstrating allyship. That is very important. Yes, in the middle there.
See what you want to see, model.
Okay, modeling what you want to see. Thank you. And one more, yes, in the back.
I started doing this. I want to be the person that's going to help the next generation in really being what they need to be as a role model for them. That's why I ran for office, and that's why I do all of this, because they're the ones that we're doing this for.
All right, thank you. So she shared that she wants to model leadership for her children so that they recognize that they have the same capacity to do so, and that was her motivator to run for office. Thank you for sharing that. And what you see on the screen here is a little bit like what a couple of our teams shared earlier, and it's a visual depiction of words that are attributed to leadership. And what we see here are, wisdom, courage, commitment, positivity, integrity, passion, confidence, determination, clear communication, honesty, clear goals, good examples, integrity, and vision, right? Do those feel like words that we can all identify with as attributes of leadership? Okay, all right. And, maybe if we happen to feel like we have some growth edges as it relates to our leadership, these are the kind of things that we can refer back to. So, leadership is something, and leadership theory is something that has evolved over time, right? And unfortunately, when you study leadership, it's often presented to us through a Western lens, right? Most of academia looks at leadership that way, assesses it that way, and presents it to a new generation of learners that way. And so what we're seeing here on the screen is the evolution of leadership theories, starting out from it being focused on the leader and that individual's traits, right? And believing that a person was a leader inherently based on certain traits that they manifested, right? And then we further evolved to focus on, being goal-oriented. And so we started looking at behavioral theories, but believing that people who carried themselves a certain way were inherently leaders. And now I want to remind you that bias has undergirded all of these theories, right? And which is why historically our leaders have been white men in Western societies. And so in this very diverse space that I'm looking at, I see folks of varying races, genders, identities, abilities, and we recognize that hopefully that's what the Democratic Party is bringing to leadership in our nation. So then we look at the next theory, focus on the control of the leader and the followers, right? I mean, the context of the leader and the followers, right? And that's very situational. So believing that depending on the circumstances, leaders are going to emerge, and that their approach to leadership and people's belief in their leadership is going to be intrinsically tied to the circumstances. And then the next is the focus on the leader-follower relationship, right? And so that leadership styles are going to be closely related to the nature of the people that are following them. Here in the Democratic Party, it's really important for us to be mindful of who follows us, right? Who's watching us, who's paying attention, and how we bring those people to the table and potentially exchange roles with them so that our followers aren't always followers and that they eventually become leaders. And then our next theory that we're looking at is emphasis on cultural norms and values. And this is very much the space that we're kind of in presently, right? So when we think about the norms and values, we are currently living in a nation where we talk about culture wars a lot, and how, one party versus another is basing their leadership, is basing their platform, is basing their approach to policy on culture wars, right? And so we as the Democratic Party are supposed to be intentional about standing up as an opposition to that, and being in kind of a reverse image of that. Does anyone have any questions about this? This is a really academic piece around leadership, but I just wanted to bring it into the conversation so that people understand that leadership evolves with time, it evolves with culture, it evolves with context. Any thoughts here?
No, I can't help it now. Recognize the influence of personal mojo. That's the best way I could say it. There's a personal something that puts you in the right place at the right time, and it has to do with virtuous fun. The example.
Okay. And so what he just shared was that he believes that a certain amount of leadership is attached to mojo, being the right person at the right time under the right circumstances. And while that may be true, sometimes that can exclude people from leadership, right? Because it doesn't fully recognize that everyone has a capacity for leadership. And we have been kind of conditioned to believe that there has to be something inherently special about an individual that makes them stand apart so much from others that we believe they're a leader. But if we want to be a leader of diverse populations, of people of varying abilities and various identities, then we have to recognize that every individual has something within them that gives them the space and opportunity to be a leader. Yes.
In my training, about servant leader, where does that fit on this continuum here?
Well, you know, the servant leader is really an approach to leadership. It's a leadership style as opposed to a particular leadership theory, right? So, but we will talk about styles of leadership. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions here? Okay. And here we go. Types and styles of leadership. What you see on the screen are a variety of types and styles of leadership. We've got visionary leadership, which is, you know, the leadership that is built on the premise that we can change the world, right? And we've got the transformational leadership that is supposed to force folks or move folks outside of their comfort zone, move people away from the status quo and the traditional approaches to leadership. Then we've got the transactional leadership, which means that we believe that if people do very specific things, that they can then receive specific things in return. So that it's very transactional. Then we have the servant leadership that you were speaking to.
Me, the servant leader is, because I was in a public position, I am serving the people who are paying me to do the job, not myself, my own, political desires or something like that.
Yeah. And you know what? Servant leadership is definitely important and valuable. But one thing that I think about when I think about servant leadership, and I heard this very recently in like a podcast or an Instagram post or something I was looking at recently, and they were talking about the challenges around the idea of servant leadership. And those challenges being that we have to give so much of ourselves that we don't take care of and preserve ourselves for further service because we are serving and leading others. And so maybe moving away from the notion of servant leadership in that way and really focusing more on intentional and reflective leadership. But there is definite value in the principles of servant leadership. So thank you. Then we've got laissez-faire leadership, the kind that just leaves it to whatever it's going to be and allows everyone in the space to show up how they show up. Autocratic leadership, we've definitely seen that in recent years show up within our nation, within our democracy. But I want to take this opportunity to remind you, fellow Democrats, that autocratic tendencies don't only happen in Republican spaces, that autocratic motivations can happen within any individual who has an ego, which we all have. And so we need to be mindful and reflective on how we show up and practice our leadership on a daily basis so that we do not succumb to subconscious autocracy in our behavior. So that's something for Democrats to really process, that we have the capacity for autocracy as individuals as well. Bureaucratic, those are folks who are so overly invested in the process and the policy that they don't leave space for flexibility and fresh ideas and different approaches to leadership. And we have charismatic, which I think speaks to what the gentleman towards the middle of the room was talking about when he was talking about mojo, kind of that individual that just really inspires people by their own presence and how they show up to join them in the movement. The coach, which another gentleman in the middle spoke to, and those are the folks who kind of guide people in their journey and their development of their own leadership. And then the democratic leader, who allows every voice in the room to be a part of the decision-making and the movement. So those are some different types and styles of leadership. What I want to invite us all to consider at this point is that we can honestly move through every one of these styles of leadership on a single day and at different points in our lives and based on the circumstances. So understanding that as whole human beings, we have such complex presences in the world that any of these can show up based on a trigger or a circumstance or the people around us. So be mindful of that. And once again, I call on people to be really intentional about being reflective leaders and to see this as a call and an invite to do so. Yes.
I was thinking the same thing, what you just said, that all leaders embody degrees of those at different times. But I'm wondering, in your expertise and your studies, do you find that in a democratic society, because we know that autocrats can be very effective in their society in getting things done, right? Because they just say do it, and it has to be done. But in a democratic society, are there certain of those leadership styles that have shown to be more effective?
His question was for those online, in a democratic society, are there certain approaches or styles to leadership that are proven or demonstrated to be more effective? And I think truthfully, it depends on the circumstances. What emerges in the moment within a good leader is often what is needed in that moment. So you can't say that one approach or style overall is better. It depends on what the moment calls for. So sometimes in a democratic space and with a democratic mindset, you may still need to show up with a certain amount of authoritarianism to get things done. And that means that you're still in alignment with the ideology of the group and of the party. But in this moment in time, we need to get it done with a certain level of expediency, with a very particular outcome in mind, and someone has to kind of take control, maybe delegate and hold people accountable for how they deliver and what those, outcomes are expected to be. And so that can be valuable in that moment in time. So I think it all depends on the circumstances and the experiences that people are encountering. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. So as leaders, leading with integrity is so important. I would hope that we all intend to lead with integrity and that we would invite those around us to lead with integrity. And so a way to do that some of us may not do because we're so often just in the trenches trying to get things done within our families, within our communities, within our workspaces, within the party, is to do a values identification process. Sit down in some reflective time, get a notepad and just write down what your values are, right? And really question yourself as to whether or not you're living in alignment with the values that you claim to espouse. When people are on the go, it is very easy for them to lose sight of their values, or when they're focused on trying to achieve a particular goal, it is very easy to lose sight of your values. So I invite you all to, in your moments of reflection, if you have some sort of a meditative process, a journaling practice, something where you're just sitting with yourself, to take the time to do this, real soon, because we know that we're entering a campaign season, right? where we all may be so busy that we don't have time for reflection in those moments. So now in this little downtime period before we get there is a great time to do this. For those of us who are club leaders, right? This is a great time to do this same activity with your club members, right? Do your values reflection first and then give them the opportunity to do it as individuals within the group, and then have group discussions, right? And figure out if you can create a list of motivating values for your group that you're going to use to move yourselves forward in this next period of activity and challenge, right? So often we don't do that. And then once you've done that, once you've identified your personal values and your group values, this is your opportunity to look at what your practices and policies are and question whether or not they are aligned with what you've identified as your values. Has anyone here ever engaged in an exercise like this, whether in the workplace with a team they did? Yes. Okay, so Doug has done this with a team that he's affiliated with or a group that he's affiliated with. Anyone else ever? I'm not going to call your name, I promise. I know Doug, that's why I called his name, but anyone else have had an opportunity? Okay, I see a few folks raising hands. Like, this is such a valuable practice for team building and for, looking at how we move forward, because that then can become a foundation of creating team goals. Okay. And so a part of understanding how we lead with integrity is understanding how our identities intersect and how they come together in who we are as a human being, right? So often we don't spend enough time in understanding that we all have intersecting identities that live within us, right? We may just go with one identity and use that as the guiding star for how we show up in the world in every space. Now, if you're doing that, what you're potentially doing is creating less opportunity for connection with diverse groups of people. Because if you show up and label yourself and present yourself to the world as one thing and one thing only, then you're saying to other people that I likely believe you are one thing and one thing only. And I don't see where we intersect because this is all I am and this is all you are. And that may be a really heavy thought, right? Like some, do you show up just as a white male? Do you show up as an AAPI woman? Do you show up as a Muslim? Do you show up as a Christian? Do you show up as a person with some sort of differing ability? What are those things, right? But you don't ever exist in the world as one thing. So understanding the intersection of your identities and allowing other people to do the same and to meet them in a space where you see them in their fullness and allow them to do the same for you creates greater cohesion in teams and stronger relationships and greater opportunities to be better leaders and invite others to do the same. Any questions here? Yes.
No, but I like it.
Thank you. He just shared that he liked that.
Faces that we are, and we give ourselves permission to people that have that create such a powerful. Really.
Thank you. He shared that recognizing that we all have many faces to who we are, and recognizing that in others as well allows us to create more powerful teams. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, so we touched upon this a little bit earlier. Leadership and followership, right? And in order to be a good leader, you have to inspire your followers, but you also have to be willing to trade places with them, right? You can't hold the mic the entire time. You got to pass the mic. You got to mentor people. You've got to develop their skills. You've got to allow them to build confidence in who they are. You've got to allow them to identify their own growth areas and move in their strengths, right? And when you are willing to trade places with them, that's what you're demonstrating, that you see the value in their followership, but that you also see the potential in their leadership, right? And when we do this, what we're saying as leaders to the folks who follow us, whether it's in the club or within the party, is that we are humble. And we think it's okay to be humble, and we invite other people to be humble in their leadership as well. So when you go back into your spaces, while you may hold a title of a club chair or a delegate or a central committee member or whatever it is, just remember that your followers are the next leaders, and you can hold space for them to move into those opportunities. Any questions here on how leaders and followers can exchange places? Yes.
Question, but I think as a leader, it's also your responsibility to look for that potential leader and pull them in and start.
Absolutely. What she shared was that she feels that as a leader, it's your responsibility to look for the potential in those around you and to groom them into leadership, right? And we know that the people in this room are likely members of clubs, right? And so few people within our communities get involved in Democratic clubs, even if they are Democratic voters, right? So the fact that someone even got involved with a club means that they have a motivation towards leadership. And so we need to see every member as a club as a potential leader. Yes, in the back.
But one of the things I see is that all of us at some point are followers too. Have the ability to empower our leaders. Take that on, make sure they're all.
Absolutely. What he shared is that at some point in our past or even our present in various spaces, we may be followers, and that we have a responsibility to prop up and support our leaders so that they can be the best that they can be. Yes, ma'am.
Until I was running for candidate last year, I didn't know there were clubs to belong to. And so someone said, oh, you have to go from the club. I said, what are you talking about? I have no idea that that's the thing.
Okay.
I'm not, but that's something that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what she just shared was that until she ran for office, she didn't even know that clubs existed as a place of gathering for Democrats, right? And so knowing that, as many of us do, right, that says to us that as leaders within the party and in our community, that there is work to be done in building bridges and in making connection. Are we at time? Okay. So let's move forward because we are running out of time. Oh, questions and answers. This is how you can reach me if you're interested in hearing or seeing me in another space, or if you just have questions or want to connect. But I want to open the floor to anyone who has a question or a remark that they want to make. Anyone? Yes, in the back.
Club reasoning is the same kind of comment that people don't know that these clubs exist. And we were thinking of it, I want to know if they tried it. They came with buttons and say, you know, member of Democratic Club asked me, or even teachers that we would buy buttons to how we could give to our members. Because I think they don't know, you know, sometimes even somebody will ask, what are you doing? And we try to Republican or Democratic step down, you know, like, right here, I think we join the club, you know. So I think if it was out there, we might have more people join it. I wonder if anybody's ever tried that.
Okay, well, what she just shared was that an approach for greater outreach to the community might be having marketing materials such as buttons or shirts or whatever that represent the club. And I think those are valuable strategies. I think a number of clubs actually do that. But I'm sure there's going to be a workshop today around marketing and outreach where you'll probably have an opportunity to talk with other clubs that are doing that and hear from people who are spearheading that kind of work in the Democratic space. So thank you for that. Yes.
You don't need the shirts, but strategically what we've done is put friendly darts up in our front yard. And people start to understand, okay, that's a friendly. You know, it's important. You'll be keeping community. And so those are like the bigger marketing signs. I mean, I don't want to say marketing, but identifiers that you're not alone.
Thank you. So she just shared that in her community in Coronado, they have allyship yard signs that they use to communicate that these are friendly and safe spaces. Yes, ma'am.
Our club has gone from the board the leadership has gone through a lot of changes and generational and we're like kind of like rebuilding and we're not always promised that our leader will stay in that role because you have family and kids and all these things. And so this was really helpful to find out like what things are we missing on our board that would help us like build and grow it, and what to really look for in some of our club members that could step up or join in on the leadership. So this is like very good for us.
Thank you. So what she shared was that her club has gone through some organizational change challenges and some shifts in leadership and some conversations around generational change in leadership. And that what they're finding is that they need to look at that, and that this presentation has been helpful for her in considering factors that they need to integrate into their decision-making and approaches to leadership. I'm getting the cue from Sayonara that we're at a wrap. I've really enjoyed talking with you all today. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so we are going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to be returning with our next presentation on conflict resolution. I'd like to invite you all to come back for that because, as we know, we are passionate people in clubs, and sometimes our passion and ideas of how to best get it done may conflict with others, and we don't want that to slow us down. So please join us again in 5 minutes. And if Helen Crenshaw can please come up. Yes, hi, Helen, come on up and we'll get you ready. What? Okay, yes, yes, please, yeah. Okay, so 5. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Hi, Derby. I wondered who that was. So, okay, great. And of course, this is how it captures me. This is the last, it had to be, right? That's what I look like, obviously. Okay, that is what I look like. Yeah, we need to find the facilities guy and say jack up the air conditioning. Well, there's so many people like coming and going. Yeah, it's true. Okay. It's already pulled up for distribution. I got a different one for notes. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I did that for distribution. Okay, so here. That has more of our speaking notes and things that are tailored. No, but I appreciate the one for distribution. That's great. So that one. Yeah. There's that one right. So to not confuse us, I'll post the other one. Okay. Okay. I'm going to give you just a minute here. I'm going to put this somewhere away so I don't. Bend the leg. That's it. Yeah, for the next items, yeah. Settle down, everybody. Our next presentation is about. Hello. Oh, hello. What does teachers do when they clap? They clap back. Except I'm holding a mic, so I clap, 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 clap. All right, and I'm hard. There. I'm just having a leadership presentation. But this is more than just leadership. Well, it's part of leadership, but it's a very, very important part. We are all very passionate in the Democratic Party. We have very, very strong opinions about how we think things can be made better, and we don't always agree. But when we disagree in a non-constructive manner, which may have happened once or twice, you know, it cuts out our ability to be effective. So we are having a presentation today, a special presentation from Helen Crenshaw and from Derby Patton Gill. And they are here to talk to us about conflict resolution. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
And you're going to pull it from the
Slides.
just fine. Okay. Just one sec. We're going to fix that for you. It's a little weird to see yourself behind up on a screen there. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, sorry, I will try to. We're trying to fix that so you don't see our silly things. There we go. Yes, there you are. Okay. So for the most of you in this room have no clue who we are, but my name is Helen Crenshaw and this is Derby Patton Gill. And we are representing 9th District PTA, which is the Parent Teacher Association. And we provide service, support, training,
leadership and guidance to over 359 unit PTAs, 17 councils, and serve over 70,000 members within San Diego and Imperial County. This district was organized in 1917 to advocate for all children and youth in San Diego and Imperial counties. And relevant to those of you in this room is that we are an all volunteer, nonpartisan advocacy organization that is a registered 501c3 nonprofit and part of the California State PTA and the National PTA, which has been advocating to improve the lives of all since 1897. So we are the largest child advocacy group in the nation. And Derby and I, as leaders in this organization, have experience kind of on all levels of volunteer organizations. And we have, unfortunately, a great deal of experience kind of balancing and sometimes managing the passions and the motivations of our members in order to kind of avoid conflict and disruptions. So we are frequently called upon after issues have developed to kind of come in and help them resolve issues, or we try to train ahead of time in order to prevent those situations from arising. And with a volunteer organization, I think you've all probably found that managing the passions and motivations of an all volunteer organization is super challenging. And it's probably why, is that better? Sorry, sir. We were asked to be here today. So in our experience, we've seen that there are some pretty simple tools that can provide a framework for encouraging healthy discussion and how those same tools can hopefully mitigate negative conflict that can derail an organization from working towards their goals and mission. So that's kind of who we are and why we're here. And I'm sorry, I'm not used to holding a microphone. I'm not a good performer. So that is who we are. And we have some basic ground rules. One, please save your questions for the end. And I have brought note cards that I can pass out if anyone wants to write questions down as we're going. I want to kind of help us read that in. Thank you. So, and when we get to that, please raise your hand and wait to be called upon. We'll take one speaker at a time because that provides kind of courtesy for everyone. So can we kind of agree on that? Okay. In the autism community, we wave our hands in a kind of acknowledgement instead of clapping, etc. So we can go to the next one. So kind of the group, well, that one. Group questions to consider. So how many of you thought that previous slide was stupid? Seriously, how many of you thought those basic ground rules were stupid because you're like, we're adults, we behave? Parent, right? Most of you probably did. I know if I was sitting here, I'd be like, what an idiot. We don't know how to behave. But the fact of the matter is that with basic rules and an agreement to some very basic rules, meetings and organizations run smoother. And it's a way for everyone involved to be aware of what's expected of them and what process is appropriate. So obviously within your individual meetings, you're going to have a different type of set of rules and a different type of set of procedures. But the point is you have to know what they are and you have to agree to them. So one of the things when we were asked to, possibly come in and do this presentation that I looked at was, what are your rules and what are your procedures? Because I wanted to try to familiarize myself with those. And what I realized was you might have overall governing rules for the overall Democratic Party, but some of your individual clubs don't seem to have governing rules, procedures, community agreements, etc. It depends on who's in the room and what's happening in the room. So one of the things we decided to focus on because of that was what those things can look like and how they can be of benefit. So points to consider with that are, if you have rules and procedures, are all of your members provided copies or access to what those rules and procedures are? And if you have them, does everyone actually know what to expect? Do you train on them? And it looks like with your agenda for the training today that there are various options for that, and that is phenomenal. And so if an organization doesn't have this in place, if you have a group or a club and you don't have governing documents, you don't have a community standard, you don't have agreements, then you run the risk of having a very small group of people that think that they know what the rules are, and then they have the ability to use those rules for their own benefit. Kind of the weaponization of an organization's rules. And that can derail any organization, no matter how large or how small. So it is crucial that that is avoided. And you do that by making sure that you have rules and procedures, and that they are reviewed and adopted regularly, and that you train on them. So the rules and procedures, kind of the overall thing that we're going to be looking at in terms of governing conflict. So just the kind of other overall agenda, that's kind of the, doesn't want to move. I don't like to move either. So overall agenda is frequently, don't be scared. Defining conflict, recognizing it, the different types. How do you manage and handle tools that you have to prevent, and then various types of resolving conflicts.
There we go.
And that is kind of our overall agenda. I'm going to turn the rest over to Jerby for a bit. He's going to talk about what conflict is and can look like.
Hey, good morning. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about what is conflict. Everybody comes to the club meetings from different backgrounds and life experiences. But conflicts happen when we have a disagreement between people who have different values and opinions, needs and interests, and you're unable to come up with some kind of an agreement, right? And when we can't move beyond conflict, it hurts the organization, and you really must act. There we go. Right, and so we need to figure out how we can recognize conflict when it does arise as one of our tools in terms of solving these problems. And really, in terms of conflict, it can kind of come back down into three different categories, right? You have a goal conflict, right? We have let's say a club, and we can't decide what our goal is, and we can't figure out how to get beyond that. That could be a conflict. We have a judgment conflict, which is, hey, we agree on our goals, but we can't figure out how to get there, right? And then you have, of course, everybody probably recognizes this, you have personality conflicts that you potentially will have to deal with. But as I said, we are here as volunteers, and we're coming from all different life experiences. And so how do we work that out? All right, we work that out by managing the conflict. And as leaders, what you really must do, you have to acknowledge conflict, you have to address it, and you have to act. And really what you need to do when you're working on those things, you have to understand the cause, the cause of the conflict and the relative facts. You need to ensure good communication between you and your members or whoever's having the conflict. When you're listening to problems, you need to listen objectively and actively. You need to be neutral and avoid getting into the us versus them kind of discussions that seem to happen quite often.
And so there are some, basic things with conflict. I think most of us are familiar with the negative outcomes from conflict. Obviously, you have frustration which generally then turns into people don't want to work within your group, your club, your organization. They give up, they go somewhere else, etc. For the long-term success of an organization, if there is continual negative conflict, the problem that you face is that people don't trust you. They don't trust your organization. They don't trust the leadership. They don't trust the motivations of people that are involved. And that obviously creates a lack of teamwork, and it actually impacts the ability for your organization or club to be sustainable, let alone accomplish whatever mission or goals that you have set out. There are also some positive impacts or results of confrontation, right? Creative solutions, you move forward. Most of us get really comfortable with things and like to just continue in the way that we are aware of, that we're comfortable with. And until our way of doing something or our way of thinking about something is challenged, nothing changes. So if we're constantly trying to do things in the same way, and we're in conflict with those that perhaps have the same goals, ideas, and missions, but we don't like the way they want to do it, you run the risk of stifling voices and perhaps not accomplishing whatever your specific goals or missions are. So sometimes going through those discussions and kind of that conflict ultimately ends up being better. And with an all-volunteer organization, one of the things that we in general in PTA particularly deal with is what we call the WEVAs. That we've always done it that way. Right? We've always done it that way. Well, congratulations, that was 30 years ago. You've done some great things. There are now some new and other ways that maybe we can get that message out. It doesn't mean that the way you've done it in the past is wrong or doesn't work anymore, but we want to try something in addition to. Can we work together on that? Right? So taking that conflict and trying to bring it forward. So, and then when you have that, so now a little more specific about how you can handle conflict.
Yeah.
That's you again.
All right. So, everybody handles conflict in a different way, and just like so many things in life. And really, it's a great idea to get to know the board members and club members, not only on a working level, but a little bit of a personal level, because everybody is different. And, recognizing those differences is really key to avoiding or, getting through conflict. And so when you think about leadership, you can think of, and I know you guys talked a little bit about leadership stuff before, but when you're working with people, some people you can give them super basic instructions on something to do, and then they're good. They're just like, I'm fine. But then if you try to help them more, right, you're micromanaging them, and then they get mad about that, right? Other people, they need every single detail written out. And so if you treat that person like the person who's the, okay, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to go do it, then they don't know what to do and they need more guidance. So you have to kind of figure that out, and you have people that procrastinate, you have your overachievers, that everybody is different. And so as a leader in a volunteer group, we're working with so many different people, but you're all brought together by your commitment to the cause, right? You are here by choice because of your commitment to the cause. So you have to recognize that and then work with different work styles. Knowing some of the basics of the conflict management is going to help you kind of lead your club and your organization, or even just be a more effective board member. All right, so I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the behaviors that inflame conflict. All right, we have a pretty good list here, but it is of course not complete. I feel like everybody maybe can recognize some of those behaviors that you've seen over the years. Yeah. The one I like is the one that seems to get kind of crazy these days. emails and texts, right? That's a big one, right? Because you can think of, you're writing an email one way and then somebody can take it another way, right? And when we're not talking to each other face to face, that can be a problem. If we're just talking to each other digitally, you can have some trouble. So anyway, I just kind of wanted everybody to kind of have a little eye on some of those things that inflame. And like I said, it's not an exhaustive list. There are so many more behaviors. And so, but there are also, great behaviors to help resolve conflict. And so you can read that list, but one I wanted to particularly highlight, and not everybody may know what this is, I want to talk a little bit about active listening. So as a leader, when we're trying to solve conflicts, one of the tools that you can use is active listening. So there are a couple of steps. You guys can Google this later if you want. It's nothing brand new, but it's a great way, I think, to get started in terms of conflict management. So the first thing, when you're actively listening, you need to make sure that you're paying attention. Like, I am focused, I am here, we are talking, I am not on my phone as well, right? You're focused on the moment. And you're operating at a space of respect for the other person. All right. And then when you're talking about things or listening, you're actively listening, you want to make sure you withhold judgment. So leave your judgment behind on this. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. And you need to be open to new ideas, kind of as Helen was talking about, get out of the Viva thing. And yeah, so suspend your judgment and hold your criticism off, and avoid the arguing or trying to make your point emphatically over somebody else. This is just we're just listening to what's going on. And then in that, you also want to make sure that you reflect on this. So you don't assume that you can understand correctly what somebody else is telling you. So back and forth reflection is a great way to indicate that you and your, the person that you're talking with are on the same page. And then so what you also want to do is ask questions and make sure that you clarify everything. So if somebody says, one thing, you can kind of repeat that back to them to make sure that you heard it correctly, so that everybody is understanding everybody. And then what you want to do is you want to kind of summarize things as you're discussing it to make, again, this is just to make sure that we have good communication between two people. And then what you're saying, this is how I hear it, and making sure that we are on the same page. And then what you're going to do is you want to make sure you can share about this, because it's really, like I said, active listening is about understanding the other person and then about being understood, right? So as you get a better understanding of the other person's perspective, then you can introduce your new ideas and feelings and suggestions. And you may want to, you may have a similar experience you had and share an idea that was triggered by a comment made previously in the conversation. That can work, but applying those 6 skills to active listening, it will allow you to be a good listener and then a better leader as well. Next one, I think it's. Nope. Helen.
So as Derby was saying that, and I'm going to go off script because that's what I do. One of the things that I was thinking of last night when we were reviewing that is that all of those things that Derby was just mentioning tend to be skills that we use in our personal life. It's how we handle our family members. It's how we handle our friends. It's how we handle the people that matter to us personally. But frequently we throw those skills out when we're within an organization and when we're trying to work with people that perhaps we don't really know well. So if you are experiencing that in whatever group that you're in, one of the problems that you may be facing is that you aren't acknowledging each other as individuals that are there for the same purpose. You might be viewing each other as competition, as opposed to maybe that uncle that you don't want to handle at Thanksgiving, but you're going to treat him really well because you know that he loves your family, even if you don't like the way he shows that. So sometimes you have to also reframe the way that you are looking at the people that you are working with within your organization. And that was just something that when I was reading through things and talking with one of my daughters who was on the spectrum last night, that struck me. That was her perspective. So we treat everyone like family, whether we like them or not. Because she doesn't always like them. So that's kind of where that came from. So thank you, Natasha. Sorry.
Do you want me to move on? I guess to do that.
Yeah, I will, I can do that. So back to what I was really kind of more prepared to talk about, aside from that comment. So the resolving conflict process. So obviously, as Derby, sorry, thank you, sir, was talking about, is the active listening, which also means that people can hear you. So if you can't, remind me, I'll do a better job with the mic. What is the situation, the conflict, have it described, and then what do the parties, what do the individuals want? What is their motivation? What is their goal? And how can you bring that together in an appropriate manner? So again, it's that family Thanksgiving table kind of concept, is you create a culture of respect for individuals, regardless of what you think about them personally, and a respect for whatever your policies and procedures are. So you are there essentially, especially if you're a leader in the organization and people have come to you to help solve a problem, you are there to help facilitate a solution, not decide upon the solution. Okay, a leader, and particularly within a club and with an organization, helps to facilitate the solution, not determine what that solution is. Because your organization, the individuals involved, are only going to succeed, you're only going to have buy-in if they feel like they were heard, acknowledged, listened to, and if they feel like whatever resolution is agreed upon, considered where they were seated at that table. And then you need to carry out whatever the solution to the problem is or was, and you need to do that immediately. And if you do happen to have governing documents, bylaws, policies, procedures, community standards, whatever, and there's something about the particular conflict that you've just experienced, if there's something about the solution that you've come to that is new and different from the traditions within the organization or from what was believed to be the interpretation of those, you have to update those rules, policies, and procedures and go through your process for that, so that it isn't something that you're doing every meeting or every year, if that makes sense. Does that, as a process, does that make sense? Updating things after you've dealt with something? Okay. And then the different ways of handling conflict. So I will say that when I was younger, I didn't understand the avoiding aspect of ways of handling conflict, because in my head, when I saw something like that, oh, avoiding conflict is just pretending that it doesn't exist. It's kind of that, ostrich concept. What I didn't recognize, and what I recognize now, and I value now, and I try to force myself in many situations to practice, is the timeout concept. So avoiding isn't that you're never going to deal with it. Avoiding is you're not going to deal with it in the moment. You're not going to deal with it when you're mad, when people are yelling at you, when you don't have all the information, and when maybe you don't even have the authority to act, right? So avoiding is different from pretending that it doesn't exist. Kind of hit and stop, stepping back and giving yourself time to work on something. It's not sending the email, it's not sending the text. The basic advice I like to give to any of kind of our new unit leaders, in particular our presidents that get hit with all kinds of nonsense on a daily basis, is in a Word document, write a resignation letter. Get it all out, everything you hate, everything that's bothering you, everything that you don't think you can handle, and all the people that you wish would just get out of your face and go away. And we all have those people. I am that person for many people. And that's fine. Write it in a Word doc. Don't put it in an email, don't send it. The act of just getting that out, save it in a folder, go back and review it in a month. If you still have the same feelings and issues, then there's a problem that you need to address. Does that make sense? Give yourself that time to reflect as well. And as part of that, take a look at the culture that you're with and the culture that you're creating. Because if you are in a meeting and you're leading a meeting and you're trying to help people, but your basic reaction to some of those people is, oh my God, I can't stand you, I want you to go away, then you need to address that within yourself, because that's what you're giving off. And that's conflict. Okay. And so it's not avoiding by denying, it's the timeout and the pause, right? We know what competing is. I want my idea only. Or my ideas are the best ideas. I have the best people. Collaborating, we can do all this together, right? That's our goal. So. Exactly. Derby's reminding me because I go off script and he's very good at keeping me in line, which is a really sad job for him. But the important part of that is that different conflicts are going to involve varying levels of that. It can all blend together. Different ways of handling things are going to blend various styles and require different types of actions and different types of ways of dealing with that. So it's not always going to be a competition. It's not always going to require a compromise, but it may always require a 24-hour pulling off period or that avoiding. It might always need a timeout just because. So I'm sorry. And then one of the most important aspects that I think we keep kind of trying to touch on within conflict management is have a process. You should have a process. Hopefully you do have a process. And that process is established. And if anything breaks down at any point, stop, go back, go through that process again. When you have that, it gives you a framework. It allows you to avoid the passions and issues that frequently come up. So the process, as it's designed, and hopefully as yours are designed, should be neutral. You should have clear ground rules. And then when you're dealing with people individually, focus on being respectful. And again, as Derby went over, that active listening. And please do not rehash. Well, 3 years ago, we thought we handled this, and okay, but we dealt with that. And now we're, so those things are kind of important to acknowledge. And if you do not have a process, if you do not have procedures within your club, your individual organization that specifically line out, spell out what your process is, what you expect from your members, what you expect from your volunteers, create one together, not just one or two, handing it down, create one so that you have that framework. Some of the ones that we use no pictures came up, that may be better. So some of the ones that we specifically use in PTA that we kind of really go to almost on a daily basis when we're dealing things. We have our bylaws and our standing rules. And I know that overall the Democratic Party has that here because I read through that in preparing for this and then realized that may not apply specifically individually to clubs. So I stepped back and tried to do something different. And then Robert's Rules of Order. And I see that you have parliamentary procedure in your training coming up. That when you're first starting out, and for those of you that are not super familiar, you think it's the most boring thing. And then the moment you have a problem in a meeting, you're like, oh my God, we need Robert's rules and who here understands them and how do I do that? It is a brilliant, brilliant tool for managing the way meetings go. And I'm super excited to see that you have that. And it's I would actually expect that from this kind of organization to really focus on that. And so for those of you that are not familiar, I hope you take advantage of that training. And if you have the ability, bring it back to your smaller groups and those that aren't here so that everyone understands. Because meetings can be challenging when only 3 people understand Robert's rules, because the people that don't feel like they're shut out. So help them, train them. Robert's rules, absolutely your friend. For some, there are going to be professional governance standards that apply. For some of you that are involved more in the financial side, you're going to have different types of rules, different types of regulations that apply that perhaps some other clubs don't have to worry about. So just depends on the overall nature of your group. The most important is the transparent grievance process. So if you have a problem, if you have a conflict and it cannot be resolved through basic discussion, meeting, coming together, you need a formal process for people to complain and have their concerns heard and addressed. It needs to be spelled out. They need to know how to access it. And they need to know how that's going to be handled. If you have a grievance committee, if some of y'all are large enough to have a grievance committee and have access to something like that, it's also important that that grievance committee work in a timely manner and that the findings of the grievance committee are something that are shared in a timely manner. Doesn't mean the discussions, the process has to be put forward, but the findings need to be. If you don't have a formal grievance process, work with some people to establish one. Does that make sense? How many of you have a grievance process? How many of you need a grievance process? Okay, it's a big one and it's important. And I know I'm off script yet again. So it's an important one.
There you go.
There you go.
That's that one.
That's it.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're up. It's not going.
Not that one.
Is it not advancing? The system says we're done.
Oh, I get it. I know what it's doing.
Oh, now it's
There we
putting
go.
up pictures. Okay.
There we go. Okay. So not to, I mean, just, it's kind of the theme of this little presentation. As Helen was talking about, procedures and bylaws and all that kind of stuff, making sure that your members know that they exist and that you review them regularly is hugely important, right? Because we want to make sure we know about these things, not in the heat of battle when we're having a conflict, because using the bylaws as a weapon and things like that. But it's your first meeting of the year, you can review our standards of our meeting standards or review Robert's Rules of Order. And it may seem like a huge amount of rule, really nitpicky, but it's really to ensure fairness and inclusion so that everybody can participate in your club. And it's not just a couple of people with really loud voices that are just going to run the show. Okay, so it really tries to bring in a sense of fairness into the meetings, right? Because when we're going to meetings as volunteers, right, we're going to go if our club, our meeting, we are behind the cause and we're doing things and it's a positive group. But if it's not that way, we don't have to come back next week. And so if we're trying to build up our membership, we want to make sure that we have really great meetings and we do really great things for the cause. So yeah, I kind of shot over handling difficult people, but as we're talking about conflict, you're gonna have difficult people in your clubs. Like I said, we're coming from all different kinds of backgrounds. When you're dealing with conflict, yeah.
Do you want me to go back?
One? Yeah,
Should I
go
go
back.
further? Okay. Sorry. I'm
Just a couple of key tools when we're talking about people who are angry or agitated and they're being difficult. You want to make sure you have a couple of clear questions that you can ask them. First off, you want to make sure that you're calm and you project positivity. But we also okay, I understand you're upset. So what would you like me to do? Right? There's one. And then the other one is, how would you like to see this resolved? right? So that, if somebody's just complaining because they want to complain, well, there you go. So that's a good way, you're speaking in person, is my advice on this, not through an email, not through a text, in person, not in front of other people. Like, we don't want to have, I don't want to sit there and call Frida out in the middle of a big meeting because something's going on. Talk to them separately. But yeah, like, okay, so what do we want to do? What do you want to see out of this? And what can we do to resolve it? Kind of get that conversation started. And really, when you're handling disagreements, you want to try and make sure that you focus on the problem and not the individual. I mean, it can be a challenge, but if you keep in mind, the mission statement of the organization or the club, that can help guide your actions. And again, like I said, in person, it's so much harder to be mad, for us to be mad at each other when we're talking to each other, like, well, of course I'm pointing at this. But if we're talking to each other like this, it's way harder to be mean than writing up a big text and firing it off in anger, right? So I suggest the personal interaction is hugely important. All right. Oh, you're one ahead.
Am
I'll
I
be quick though.
One ahead? I'm sorry.
All right, so as we're doing this work, there will be conflict that comes up. But what you need to do, you need to make sure that you're aware of your leadership style. I think I heard some talk about leadership style in the first presentation. Like I said, you want to make sure you stay positive and you have a can-do attitude. I want to make sure that, you need to understand a couple of things in terms of building a strong team. You want to make sure that you can empower people. You want to make sure that you set expectations early and that you praise the success of the organization and the individuals. That's really going to help with a lot of conflict right there. And then, again, I keep saying this, you want to make sure that you promote and practice open communications. That is so key to this. And so hopefully now you've got some skills. I don't know, is that an acronym or whatever for that? So you've got some skills, you know how you've got to stay calm, keep it respectful, identify the problem, listen, look for solutions, and set ground rules and use your tools and procedures.
Anyone? Yeah, we have a few minutes, and so does anyone have any questions? Ma'am?
So, no, you had a slide that kind of went away about resources, and I was particularly wondering about, resources in terms of the grievance process.
Specific written out grievance process?
Yeah, and what would you, so that you can develop your own, but is there something already existing that resources?
That template right there in the top corner.
So, that template in the top corner there those are our bylaws for, PTA.
Right.
There is reference to the grievance process. There is a committee, and it tells you who can be on the grievance process committee, etc. But in our particular organization, it is spelled out more in what we call our toolkit, because those are things that the organization itself has designed to meet our needs. If you are comfortable doing some web research, to Google grievance process, you will find varying examples of those. They tend to be organization specific, and they can also focus a lot on the type of community that you're dealing with. So you're going to have a different type of grievance process within the medical community, and that you're going to have a different one within PTA. So in terms of a basic template, I don't have that. I can tell you that the way things are, the way things are aligned, it's something that you can spell out within the bylaws that I saw for the overall Democratic Party that I was looking through in preparing for this. there did seem to be mention of some specific rules and procedures that I believe if you're within a club or a group that's under that, apply to you. So that is something that you should talk specifically to the leadership here about, is what's appropriate for you and can they help you establish that? Does that make sense?
In the back,
Did that answer your
Yes,
question?
thank you, that helps.
in the way
I-
back, so, way back.
Wait, okay, so I'm gonna let you, because I can't, I have my reading glasses on, and so I just see a lady with her hand up, so
Yeah, in the peach sweater.
there we go.
Hi, thank you all for the chat today. I have a question on the PTA component. Is it an overall governing body that you all are utilizing to facilitate the ground rules, foundational principles and things?
Yeah, so the question was if everybody was that about kind of PTA as an organization. So, yeah, it is a national organization, I mean, kind of like you guys too. We have national PTA, there's the California State PTA, and then there are district PTAs, which are kind of like broken into the counties in California. And then we have councils that are kind of aligned with school districts, and then the basic units in all of our schools. And so, yeah, we all operate under the big umbrella of the national PTA. And, but like, I think, I'm not sure about the grievance procedure from the national PTA, if we want to use that for an example. But like the California State PTA has established one. And so, our members in our school units, like if there's a grievance that even at that level, there is a process that they can look up to follow through to see if they can get that conflict managed. Did that kind of answer what you're talking about?
So it is so at the party versus us trying to individualize this government, does it make sense for us to establish our own board of trustees or committees so that we establish the ground rules at California, San Diego? What do you recommend for us to facilitate something at that level so that it's created for all of us as a whole and we operate no matter which party you belong to, if you move from county to county, district to district, and it's the same for everybody across the board.
So, yeah, so I mean, just from my perspective of not really knowing anything that's, the details of the organization and all that, I would say that, yeah, like it would be better handled with like a higher up kind of creating, as we were talking about, kind of some templates and some general guidelines that then can be employed by, the clubs, and used by them as well. And so, Katie, did you have something for this?
Yeah, I
Okay.
was gonna try and maybe give some hint. I served on the ethics committee for several years, and we used policies and procedures of the county party as our guiding principle. But there's a whole process that you can see online about how the ethics committee uses, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
So yeah, the ethics committee has a whole process by which they do deal with grievances in the party. And so if you go to the party website, you can actually look up what the processes are on that and kind of use it as a template for each individual club throughout, just so we're all kind of in agreement. I think that's probably the best possible template for our club to have.
All right, I think you guys have another panel coming up in a second. Let me get one more question. So how about, I saw your hand up first.
Thanks. So you talked a lot about personal conflict, but also competing goals can be a conflict just organizationally. Do you have any advice on how to handle that? If, you want to say, what are our top 3 goals for this year? And there's 18 ideas. What's the best way to manage that?
He's like, do you want to handle
Oh, no, you.
it? I mean,
Are you in conflict?
so, yeah, no, we're good. I can follow him anywhere. Like, he's had to deal with me for a few years. And I am not always, the person you want, because I can not, I've learned, I've matured, I've grown into this, because when you're talking about, establishing goals and establishing priorities, do you already have a process for that? Who helps you determine that? Do you take that input from all of your members? Do you rank them? Do you discuss how they can come together? Are there some goals that can actually merge so that instead of 3, it's really one overriding issue? Do you already have a process for that? And then when you're determining are you just voting on that as an organization and whoever, whichever ones get the top votes become the issue? Do you have a process for that already? No. Okay, so then that's kind of, the place that you started. How are we going to determine that? Right, so you create a process around that. You can talk to some of the other clubs and organizations that you believe within your overall group that are successful. How do they do it? Reach out.
And really dedicating like set amount of time to just talk about like let's say your organizational goal. That is key, right? So you're like, okay, we're gonna meet on Tuesday, for an hour, we're gonna talk about organizational goals. And, that could start off with some brainstorming, and yeah, you may have 18 different things, but yeah, no organization is ever gonna be able to get all that accomplished. And you got to think about timelines and things like that. So I think dedicating specific time and then kind of sticking, maybe we do it every year. So you're not stuck with that the whole time and things do change, but you have established something. So it's not like, Helen comes in and she's like, oh my God, we have to go do this and we have to do that. And you're like, well, you're already kind of locked into these other things. And then, maybe we can take that on next year, or if it's important enough, maybe we have a meeting to specifically look at that. But try and keep everybody kind of in the right direction. Can be a little bit of a challenge, but yes, spending dedicated time on developing those goals.
So just, as a brief closing, when you're in an organization and when you are working and relying upon volunteers, in particular, if you are a leader of that organization, it is really important for you to honor the fact that you have people that are giving you their time for free. They're leaving their families, they're leaving, their professional time, their personal time to come in and see and hopefully work with you towards some shared goals and some shared vision. It's important that you respect that of them. And it's important that you create meetings and you create an environment that does foster that positive, inclusive environment that people are going to want to join and that they're going to want to work within. And again, you do that by ensuring that you have rules and procedures that everyone understands, that you allow for the ability to have conflict, discussion, positive, negative, and that you provide a clear, transparent, written process for handling disagreements or grievances. And if all else fails, we've already said it several times, ask others for help. What is their process? What works for them? What can you mirror? So thank you for giving us the opportunity for this today. I hope it was useful. I appreciate the fact that we're in a room of volunteers that are here on a Saturday. I know that that's not always the easiest, but thank you all for being here, and I hope you found this useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Our next sessions are going to be held in the 2 rooms right across the hall here. So in the room, we have 2 rooms. Parliamentary procedure with Doug Case is going to be held in the room on the left-hand side. I certainly need that. Others may too, as the club president. I'm never sure what motion I'm supposed to be making. And then on the right-hand side, so right here in room 163 is parliamentary procedure with Doug Case. Right next to it, room 162, the auditorium room, is increasing participation in activism events. And I sit on the board of 2 affinity clubs. I can't divide myself, but I certainly think they're both very good sessions. I would encourage you to go to either one. They will be starting shortly. Room 162 is increasing participation in activism events, and parliamentary procedure is in room 163.
My daughter put that together.
So I'm the same way. I'm like. Right, right. Yeah. No, but I was like. It can be a superpower, right? Use it when you need to. Yeah. Oh, right? Yeah. It's pretty forceful. It's pretty forceful. But it's good to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. We appreciate it. How did you feel it went?
You know, I have no idea. I'll think about it and.
I would have, oh, am I still recording?
Because it would be, because we've never done this outside of PTA, right? So you'd be interested.
Next
Some
time.
other time.
Next time.
Ask. Ask her. I'm always open to feedback. This
Yeah.
is very different to do in an organization that we are not familiar with in terms of what the rules and governing bodies, because normally we're able to really focus on this part of the bylaws and this part.
Okay,
So.
yeah,
you're
yeah,
interested to see
yeah.
what's Helpful for
Well,
that.
I don't know if in PTA, every club has its own individual bylaws, but here we do.
They do, but there's a template. There are only certain things that are different.
Yeah, kind of the same here, but it also becomes very competitive between clubs. So it's not just managing conflict in your organization. It's that when I said I'm having this summit, some people said, oh, that's the title sponsor, I won't go. Yeah, it is challenging, yes. So, yes, rivalries, drama, etc. So thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely.
I tried to be here as much as I could, but I also was trying to make sure that stuff was moving on the perimeter. Okay, sounds great. Okay, see you later. Okay. Yes, the restrooms are next to the Go Team table in the front office on the left-hand side. So room 162 is Club Activism. This is Parliamentary